Hi there, welcome to Mark Glenn's channel. I'm coming to you from a hotel room in Sydney where I'm quarantining. And I've been wanting to make a video for a long time to show you my portable setup, the setup that I travel with, which I do quite a lot. So I've built this little system. There's nothing fancy, but it works for me. It gets the job done and gets me the ability to be able to put down ideas and keep on working. So let's take a look at what I got going here. First, let's look at the hardware. Obviously, I've got my computer. This is a new MacBook Pro, blazing fast, and I bring with a monitor. I've got a very cheap, lightweight monitor that you can easily pack in your bag. Now, as far as playback system go, I do have small speakers that I bought for traveling, the Neumanns, and they are awesome speakers, but even though they're that big, they are heavy and take up an entire suitcase. I don't always bring them. I didn't bring them this time. In lieu of that, I have headphones. You have to have headphones you can wear for long periods of time, and I find that open back headphones is the only way to go for that. I reviewed these headphones actually elsewhere on my channel if you want to take a more detailed look, but having closed headphones will drive you nuts after about 4 hours of wearing it, so these are great. I also bring this little Bose. You can't really work on this thing. It's not, the sound quality is nowhere near good enough to be able to work on or mix on anything. But every now and again, if you just need a break from those headphones, it's nice to have it to be able to just switch it on and listen through that for a little while. Then I have my input devices. Of course, I bring a trackball mouse, which I love very much. I have a keyboard, which it's got the mini keys, but it doesn't bother me too much, and it's got all the controllers that I'm ever going to need. This is the Akai MPK Mini, and the nice thing is that'll fit really nicely into your laptop bag, no problem. And, of course, in this case, I've rented this big piano, but I don't even have that plugged into my system. That's just for playing. So this serves me very well indeed. And I also bring with my breath controller, which is the TEC breath controller. This thing is amazing, especially for the libraries that require or at least make use of that thing. So you can get very realistic programming, especially with wind instruments and the like. And then, of course, I have the connections you need, and that's where you can really make a mistake by forgetting something and then being in a foreign country where it's not easy to find that thing, and then you're screwed. Best thing is always just to lay them all out the night before you leave and think through how you're going to connect everything up to make sure you haven't forgotten anything. The first thing is power. So what I do is I have, let me show you. I have a power strip, which is catering to all my American plugs, and it's just a straight old American power strip. However, I then bring whatever converter I need to plug that power strip into. This, for example, is for South Africa, and this, for example, is for Australia. If I'm going to Spain, I'll bring the one for Europe or, Spain or wherever you may be. Make sure you have the right power. I also bring quarter to quarter inch. So if I suddenly need to be working with guitar or bass or something, I can always rent one wherever I am or borrow one, and I have the cables if I need. Then I have my microphones. Now, I always bring my stereo pair of AKG 414s. These are like the best all-round mic in the world. I mean, these things are great on almost anything. So if you're singing or recording something in the field or whatever it is you may be doing, you just can't beat these guys. Of course, I bring cables for them. I bring their mounts. I don't bring with mic stands. They're too heavy and bulky and it makes no sense. You can buy mic stands so cheap wherever you are. Or very often I'll just take, someone's camera tripod and just tape them if I have to. A boer maak 'n plan, which basically means there's always a way to figure something out. I have my drive over here for samples, which is basically, it's a 4 terabyte drive, and it's basically an exact copy. In fact, it's a clone. I clone my sample drives in my studio the night before I leave. I'll clone them so that they're completely up to date with whatever sample libraries I've added or whatever I've got going on in my studio sample library. This is an exact copy of that. Now for the software. I use exactly the same setup. I use Logic and I use Ableton's Live. Ableton's Live is running in Rewire compared to Logic if you want a more in-depth explanation of how that works, look at my video on my template. But it's essentially the same software setup. There are two important differences. One is I don't have my VE Pro library with me. Now that's a library where all of my orchestral samples sit on an external PC, and I have that built as a template into my Logic system that has all the orchestra on it. All the orchestral samples that you could ever need are built on there. Now I didn't obviously bring that machine with me, and in all the years I've been traveling, I've never really had a need for that. I'm always find that through a process of just coming up with a few string samples you need to be able to get ideas down, I have everything I need at my fingertips, and all those samples that are in that orchestral template exist here anyway. I can just bring them up here. It's just that they're not connected via VE Pro on a separate machine. And if you want an explanation of how all this works, again, look at my episode of my template. But what I do is I open up the exact same Logic template that I have in my studio. And so when it opens, all of these tracks will open up, but they won't be linked to anything. And in fact, the VE Pro plugin that these are connected to will show up over here as not available. And when you first open, let me show you. When I first open this template, or whatever it is, it will show me the plugins that it's not finding, because these plugins exist on my system back at home, and I don't have these plugins here. For example, my UAD stuff, because of my UAD setup at home in the studio, I don't have access to any of those UAD plugins here because I'm using a different interface and a different system. It really doesn't bother me. But the cool thing, the amazing thing about Logic is just hit continue and it doesn't disable this or anything. It just shows up as missing. Now, when I take these files back into my studio and open them up, it'll find that plugin, no problem. And so transferring projects between this setup and the home setup or the studio setup is no problem at all. It'll just, once again, relink all that stuff once I'm in the studio, and voila. Now, the other important difference is the video, the picture. In my studio, I use Video Slave, a program called Video Slave, again, well explained in my template video, and that is to port video out to my third monitor. And so here in this setup, I do not have that, and I do not use that program. So the only difference is then I need to import any video I'm working on into Logic and use it natively inside of Logic. Not a big deal. It takes a few seconds. Let's take a look. All I need to do is open up a movie, and then it'll say, do you want to open the movie? Yes, of course I do. And extract the audio track. It'll match your frame rate if it needs to. And of course, you probably want to use the frame rate that the picture is set at. In this case, it's 24. I'll switch the project then to that frame rate, and it will extract the audio of the project. Look how quick that is. Now, what I then do is you can close this picture, and Logic will have a little picture in the side here. So you can continue working in both programs. However, if you want the picture to be big, then what I do is I just port it over to this screen and have it obscure my Ableton Live for a while, and lock that screen set in with Logic, and so that anytime I go to another screen set, I can always come back to that screen set, and there's my picture, and I can place it wherever I want. And then for the audio, as you'll know if you've watched my template video, I have here the dialogue and the temp of the picture coming in from two different channels from the Video Slave program. Again, I'm not using that program here. Now, as you know, our work copies, pretty standard, will have all the dialogue and sound effects and stuff on the left channel, and all the temp music on the right channel. You want to be able to mute that temp music independently of the dialogue, and you want everything to be in the center. So then I just make a copy of that imported audio onto my dialogue track over here and onto my temp track over here. Now it's exactly the same thing. So what you want to do is, and this is a little trick in Logic, you've got to go into the environment to do this. I'll bring the environment window over here. And I have the dialogue and the temp out here separately in the environment. And here you can change what this is listening to. In this case, you want the dialogue to listen to only what's on the left, and you want the temp to listen to only what's on the right. And that way, without having to do any panning or anything of that nature. You're only on this channel going to hear what's on the left side of the stereo interleave track, and here you're only going to hear what's on the right side of the stereo interleave track. And this way, this mimics exactly the setup I have when I'm in my studio, except now you're dealing with actual audio. And so when I get back into the studio, all I have to do then is just erase those two things, and my dialogue and temp will now be coming from the Video Slave application as an input, and the net result will be exactly the same. I'll be hearing the same thing. So that makes translating these sessions into the studio very easy. This process of getting the video organized took me less than a minute. And as far as live is concerned, well, live is just absolutely brilliant, that it doesn't care where you are, what your studio is. The only thing is, because I'm running in Rewire, live can only run effects natively. I don't have any access in live to any of the audio unit stuff, but that's the same in my studio, so that's not a lose. Now, when they finally let me out of this hotel room and I get to my brother's place, I'm going to set all this up again. I'm going to get some speakers from him that are pretty decent and okay, and I've got the place to plug them out of, so I'm good to go with that. I'm also going to get some camera tripods from my dad, and I'll tape those microphones to those tripods, so I'll have a working microphone setup. Now, even though I prefer to go back to my studio to finish my projects, for example, if I have written some string lines just using some Kontakt instruments that I bring up and sketched out a nice string arrangement, I want to go back to my studio and use all of my VE Pro template to really do a good job on the strings. And by the same token, I also just am more comfortable doing my final mixes in my studio, where I'm very comfortable with my speakers and the environment. This is great, and whatever speakers I might get on along the way on the road are great, but they really aren't the exact reference that you need, which my studio provides me. However, it doesn't mean you can't do really cool stuff on the road, and again, it depends on the style of music. So basically, that's it. It's a really simple little setup. It fits into basically one big bag, or maybe two if if it's winter and you have more clothes you have to take. But even then, most airlines are only charging, 30, 40, 50 bucks for an extra bag, so it's not a big deal. And, you can achieve amazing things with this little setup. In fact, the last 10 years of my life, when I had my extra place in Mexico, I started every single project almost on this system. And I would work there for a few weeks, come up with all the themes and what have you, and then go back to my studio in Los Angeles and finish the project there. And I really of course I like traveling, but I like also limiting myself. So not having my usual VE Pro template in here, and not having my UAD plugins in here, not having the big fat extra third screen. I find all of that kind of creatively stimulating somehow, being forced to deal with a minimal setup. So I really love the setup, and knowing when I'm out there traveling that I have the ability to go and write music in a hotel room or wherever it may be with minimal setup time, and the ability to be able to take these files into my studio and just keep on working on them like nothing happened is just amazing. So I'll catch you on the next one, and don't ever stop learning.